Have you ever wanted to play a CRPG taking place in a nationalist society where bigotry was the country's motto? Have you ever wanted to clone yourself into women and then take those women as your wives? Because no one could possibly understand the depths of your soul but you, or which fingers you like stuck inside of you. Have you ever wanted to own a person, or to be owned? Well, Morrowind might just be what you're looking for. Morrowind is a place that's so free that if someone says something mean to you, you can legally have them murdered. A place where disease and blight blow in from time to time on a red fucking wind. Morrowind is a really cool place to explore, do favors for the devil, and hoard endless amounts of treasure. Who are the wonderful people behind such a progressive title? Bethesda. Those guys. The ones who did that thing. Did you know that Todd Howard is credited as the project lead on Morrowind, as well as the original concept designer? Did you know that? Did you? That brings up quite a few questions like, what the fuck happened to you, Todd? Show me on a doll where the money touched you. But that's not an important question. An important question would be something like, who really came up with the concept design for Morrowind? Because I don't believe you, Todd. An even more important question would be, how does Morrowind hold up to today's standards? Can I play it after having been spoiled for years by games that took me by the hand and led me directly to the quest? Picked me up when I fell down, kissed my boo-boos, and told me everything was gonna be okay, and most of all, never took the training wheels off until I no longer looked wobbly. Will I be able to play Morrowind if my thumbs have morphed into flaccid penises? Well, let's dig in, shall we? The game works right out of the box, so this isn't like Daggerfall where, yeah, sure, it works out of the box, but it's shitty, and you end up needing an engine overhaul just to get it to run well. Morrowind is more of the kind of game where, if you want to play it, you could do it while your eyes are bleeding, or you can do it in a way where every giant mushroom and Spanish moss-infested tree lovingly fucks your eyeballs in 1080p. I highly suggest if you plan on playing this game that you take a look at the Morrowind graphics guide on nexusmods.com. It has a huge list of mods that you'll want to install, in the order in which you want to install them. But I'm gonna be honest with you, don't use a mod manager. A lot of these mods require manual installation in order to work correctly. And sure, you might bork your install, but that's life in a moddable world. MGEXE, or Morrowind Graphics Extender, takes the basic game and does things like increase the view range from this to this. It also does things like remeshing the terrain. The program will add detail to the world mesh by adding polygons which on the lower end machines will set your motherboard on fire thanks to the increased view distance, but you can mess with the terrain and view distance until you find something that looks good while running well. On top of this, it also adds shaders, like screen space ambient occlusion, sun rays, and bloom, as well as shadows. Not just shadows under players and NPCs, but shadows for world objects like trees, which will also move and stretch with the time of day. There's also per pixel lighting. I'm pretty sure it adds a mod that makes it so whenever a light source is present, like a candle or torch, that it emits light instead of just sitting there looking pretty. It's the most important mod to place first, as on top of all of this, it allows the vanilla game to be played in 1080p without a whole lot of fucking around. Next up is Morrowind Code Patch. It's essentially a compilation of every fix the community has compiled into one handy installer. It allows you to pick and choose which fixes you want in the game in case you just so happen to like the quote-unquote functionality of an exploit or bug. I'm a vanilla guy, but I cannot stand the Magicka system in this game, so I always install the Fair Magicka regen mod and a face mod to replace those horrifying faces.
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
And just like Daggerfall, someone has ported Morrowind. I'm not too sure what the deal is with Open Morrowind, but what I do know is that it somehow made it more difficult to install mods, so I ditched it immediately. Someone, anyone, preferably 300 of you, comment at me in the comments about how dumb I am and how I should be using Open Morrowind. Race determines a lot of things for you in Morrowind. It determines your starting ability scores, the skills you're most comfortable with, as well as what form of STD your parents passed down to you, while the signs you were born under determines what special ability you were granted simply by being born. Race also determines if people will like you, or kick you out of their tavern because they don't take kindly to murder like you in their fine establishments. Don't worry. when you ascend to godhood, you'll make them pay. You'll make them all pay. Depending on your starting race, you could have an 85 in endurance to start, as well as a 60 in strength. So if you want to make the strongest mage you can, it would seem that a high elf would be a better choice than Dunmer, because Dunmer stats are lower in the most important categories, like willpower, intelligence, and personality. But it doesn't really matter. Starting stats just decide how much fun stuff you'll get to do in the beginning before you have to start grinding, because if you have low starting health, there's certain things you can't do, like tank this mage's spell. A mage with 30 health will die in one hit to this mage, so to that character, a lot of things are off limits at first. But build optimization can help ease those growing pains, and starting off with a ton of magicka means you get to use very powerful long-range spells if your starting destruction and spell chance is high enough. A Breton, for example, is the superior choice, in my opinion, for a mage class, but the Red Guard are exceptionally good melee races, and if built correctly, they can start off with some of the highest starting health points with an endurance of 85. While Khajiit are the superior choice for thieves, but the way the system works is it's not just about the stats. Racial passives, powers, and signs have an effect on the character as well. The races also get higher stats and skills as well. So if you were thinking of doing a destruction build, if you were the min-maxing sort, an Altmer would be the superior choice over a Breton, as the Breton don't get a bonus to destruction. The opposite is true if you're doing a restoration build. Dunmers, Imperials, and Argonians have the easiest time multiclassing. I mean, technically you can make your race be whatever build you want. I mean, hell, you can be all builds at once if you spend enough time in game making it happen, but for those that want efficiency from their builds, races have a huge impact on what kind of character you build, but so do their passives. One of the things you should notice about the High Elves right out the gate is that they no longer have 100% immunity to magic, they have 50% fucking weakness to it. I've not been able to find a lore reason for this, but I can't say I look too hard either. Altmer get a racial bonus of 1.5 times magicka, but that weakness ensures that every time you get into a fireball fight with somebody, you're going to be worried. While Bretons, the men so manly they don't even need hair, enjoy a 0.5 times buff to magicka, a shield skill, and are 50% resistant to magicka. That means you can enjoy a nice 1 times buff in magicka if you pick the correct sign, and you take no penalties. And there's no need to worry about a lack of magicka, because once you get up in levels, you'll start enchanting your gear with constant effects. This can push your intelligence well into the high 190s or above, so you won't be strapped for mana. If you take the Atronach sign, you'll get spell absorption of 50%, get a 2x bonus to magicka, but you also can't regen magicka without potions. In the early game, this fucking sucks the fattest of throbbing, veiny, bumpy dicks. But in the late game, you'll become the most powerful deity ever conceived. It's just getting through that early game that can be a real problem for some people. A great early game sign to take is the Lady, for a big boost early on for those with low personality and endurance. Hit points are very hard to come by in early game, so until you're able to afford some enchanted gear to buff your health, the Lady could be a good jumping off point, especially to new players. Another thing to keep in mind is that females have lower strength and endurance stats, but have higher speed for certain races. No doubt an attempt at making the species truly dimorphic, but this is something you want to keep firmly in your mind as you create your character. First up in the attribute category is derived stats. These are abilities you'll see the most. They consist of health, magicka, fatigue, and encumbrance. We call these derived stats because their value is taken from a formula derived from an attribute. Now, for instance, your max encumbrance is determined by your strength times 5. Unlike most games with an encumbrance system, it doesn't just determine how much shit you can carry. This was developed at a time when Bethesda's priorities lay in the simulation realm. So they took most attributes one step further and asked, how does this stuff affect players' physiology? Not just, how does this affect what the player can do? The more you're carrying, the slower you move. It's the reason you wouldn't want to start a mage with heavy armor. I mean, you can, just be prepared to be frustrated. A mage needs to be quick on his feet, so if anything, a mage could choose light armor or mix and match for the purposes of maximizing their enchanting. But it isn't the best idea to go with an armored howitzer build, because walking slow by default is annoying, but walking even slower than that is worse. But you know, do whatever you want, nothing's off limits. Health is determined by your strength and endurance at character creation, and then depends solely on endurance each level. Magicka is determined by intelligence, and that is all pretty straightforward. Health is how many times you can get bonked on the head, or set on fire.
Fire! I am on fire!
And Magicka is how many times you can set others on fire. But hey, listen to me. All that shit's great, but they're not the main attraction. Listen, are you listening? Listen. Did you know that fatigue is one of the most important stats in the game? It is! Because it influences so many abilities. I mean, basically everything worth doing is influenced by how sleepy you are. If the only Elder Scrolls game you've played is Oblivion,
You are the one from my dreams.
or Skyrim, you might be wondering why you can't do anything in Morrowind. Why can't I lockpick this chest, or that chest, or any chest? Why are none of my spells casting? Why can't I hit this fucking cliff racer? Why can't I jump high?
White men can't jump.
Well, fatigue determines the success rate of nearly every action in the game, from weapon attack hits, spellcasting failures, lockpicking success, and even determines the rate in haggling. It also determines the height of your jumps, so if you're able to, have a spell of Restore Fatigue, or always keep a potion at the ready, because your fun will be determined by how low that fucking bar is. Now, do I like this system of fatigue? Well, honestly, not really. But that probably has less to do with the fatigue system and more to do with the default speed at which you move. The default move speed feels like you're somehow moving slower than time itself, like you've somehow broken through time and space, and while you move for 1 second, in reality, 4 seconds has passed in the real world. But the question is, how do you increase your speed? Unarmored? Fuck no, are you crazy? Well, how about dagger? Yeah, sure, you could do that, and daggers are pretty crazy when you have high speed. You can take the easy way out, if you're a little bitch. Or you can punch things in the goddamn face.
And the choice is yours.
Hand-to-hand combat has something to do with fatigue as well. But not what you'd think. See, unlike other melee skills, punching someone in the face does not take away health. It depletes the stamina bar. This is an interesting tool in your arsenal, because depending on your build, you can knock someone out. And as you reduce their stamina, you'll notice that you're also fucking up their ability to cast spells. And that means your enemy is just one punch closer to death. Because once you knock a dude down, he keeps going down again, and again, and again. Now, the way you level hand-to-hand is even more interesting. What you do is you find the nearest rat, and you run up to him swinging. You don't stop hitting that attack button unless you're healing yourself. The rat is resilient and mean, so you won't run the risk of killing him. Yet. But in about 30 levels of hand-to-hand, you'll come close. So you keep hitting that attack button until your fingertips are bruised and every button press sends a sting up your arm. Eventually, your wrist will ache with the effort, but don't give up. You keep hitting that rat, and before you know it, you'll gain a level. Now, you'll hit the rat one more time every 5 minutes, and before you know it, 3 or 4 sometimes, and you'll be on easy street in no time. Then, when you're done training, calm the beast and casually run away to go and rest up for training tomorrow. Sure, the rat's gonna probably wind up with brain damage eventually, but that's the life of a boxer, and he knew that getting into life. And while others may see this as animal cruelty, you know it's just another day in the office.
There's a lot of fun you can have with a computer.
All of this training has a purpose, however. You are working your way up to a real challenger, the Quama Forager. Yeah, this enemy will test all of your endurance, all of your stamina, all of your wrist power. But this isn't a simple sparring match. No, it's a fight to the death. But you're not satisfied with the Quama. No, you need a bigger challenger, something like a dog. Now you're ready. Ready to venture into untraveled territory, the great unknown. It is now time to pick on someone your own size. And now you know how to box like strategy. I guess you also learned about derived stats. Attributes is up next. Strength determines how much damage you do, how much weight you can carry, your max fatigue, and how many hit points you start off with. A character who's rocking normal strength of 50 will do 100% of their damage potential before the armor damage reduction. Each point above or below that will reduce or increase the damage modifier by 1%. If you manage to get your strength to 100, and then enchant your equipment to get an extra 50 strength, you could potentially do 150% more damage. And with potions and fortified strength spells, you can probably one-shot Dagoth Ur with a Chitin Dagger. It's a really fun and very balanced game. Intelligence is a fun one, because on the surface it seems normal. It gives you more spell points so you can cast more spells, and each hour you sleep you gain 15% of your intelligence back as magicka. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't end there. Intelligence also modifies alchemy and enchantment directly in different ways. So intelligence affects the effectiveness and duration of potions, and the success rate of enchantments. Again, very balanced game. Willpower affects your resistance to magicka and your max fatigue. Now, contrary to what you may think, this does not make you resistant to destruction spells that consist of fire, frost, or shock effects. But you just said magicka resist. Ain't them magicka spells, motherfucker? Yeah, they are, but this is broken Bethesda logic, son. We gotta think outside the box. With a higher willpower, you'll be resistant to any spells that attacks your health, attributes, or fatigue directly, as well as nearly all debuffs like poison, calm, charm, weakness to element, you name it. You'll also be resistant to spell effects like paralyze, which is fucking stupid, but only when it happens to you. Agility affects how often you hit with a weapon, how often you dodge attacks, how often you get knocked down, and your ass will be laying on the ground a lot if you don't pay attention to this attribute. Agility is most important to fighters, but it's also important to thieves, as it affects the success rate of sneaking, pickpocketing, lockpicking, blocking, and jumping. It also affects your max fatigue. Speed is the most important skill of them all, because it affects how fast you move, and your default movement speed is slower than a sloth fucks. Endurance determines your starting health, your max fatigue, and the higher your endurance, the less fatigue you lose while running and fighting. It's a very important ability score for fighters in really any class that depends on melee fighting. Personality determines the success rate of persuasion and dialogue and haggling, but it also determines the disposition of NPCs. The higher this ability score, the more people like you right off the bat. This can be useful in dealing with some of the houses that just don't like you because you're more prone to skin cancer than they are. Jealous bastards. I think we've all been in that situation where we created our dream character after theory crafting in our heads, modeling our idea after some manga we saw a couple years back, naming the character something edgy like Bane Nightblade, only to find out that our character ended up being good at absolutely nothing. Let's learn about skills. There are 3 categories that skills fall into: major, minor, and miscellaneous skills. If you've played any Elder Scrolls game other than Skyrim, then you probably know what all this is and you can skip this part. But for you that don't, each category grants bonuses in obvious and not so obvious ways. Major skills get to start at a minimum of 30 points upon character creation, and each major skill only requires about 75% of the normal experience required to level it. So not only do major skills start off stronger, but they also advance quicker. Minor skills start off at a minimum of 15 points, and each minor skill requires 100% experience to level. Miscellaneous skills, on the other hand, start off at 5, which renders them almost useless in the early game. And without training, they will take a long time to increase, since they also require 125% of normal experience to advance 1 level. Now, a specialization is something you only need to worry about when you're creating your character. There are 3 categories that skills fall into: combat, magic, and stealth. Depending on which one you pick, your starting skills in that category will get an extra 10 points. On top of the potential that you get from a racial bonus, you could have a starting skill with 50 points, which really will accelerate your leveling. Picking skills might not be terribly obvious, but it's all about what your character will be doing the most. But if you want my opinion, this is the way I typically build out a character. For major skills, you always want at least 1 reliable offensive skill, 1 defensive skill, plus something like alteration or security to handle locks, or even sneak, and the rest is up to you. But I've seen many guides recommend spells for those last 2 slots, which makes a lot of sense. Even if you're a fighter, each spell school gives you so much utility that it makes nearly every action easier, from simple things like combat, or healing from combat, or shielding yourself from damage. Early on in the game, I noticed that mages will shred someone with normal resistances to magicka, so having a resist magicka spell or reflect spell early can really come in handy. Now, the thing you need to realize is that there are a few skills in this game that are absolutely broken, and as such, you'd be a fool to pass them up no matter what your build is. Two of those skills are Alchemy and Enchant. These should be your go-to minor skills because they are too goddamn good to pass up. The rest is up to your build. Everyone has different definitions of fun. Some people like hanging themselves from the ceiling by meat hooks, and other people like min-maxing in Morrowind. To min-max in Morrowind, you simply make sure that your starting skills are as low as possible, and the skills that you use the most are in the miscellaneous category, while the skills you'll never use are in the major and minor slots. It's a bit backwards. You grind out levels in the attributes you want to level with the goal of getting a 5 times in the level up screen. But in order to get that, each skill and each attribute must be leveled 10 times. That means in order to get a 3 in 3 stats, you must level them 30 times collectively. Then level your major and minors 10 times total to initiate the level up process. So in essence, you've got to do this stuff 4 times to level once. It isn't worth it, kids, don't bother. Just like in Daggerfall, your character gets stronger the more you use a skill. But if you level a skill you haven't picked as a major or minor, it doesn't count at all towards leveling, but will instead contribute to the bonus you receive in any given attribute when you do level. This is what enables you to get a +5 in every attribute you focus on. The maximum bonus you can receive per level is 5, and it feels really good to max out a skill. So if you want to maximize your gains, a much more reasonable way to do this is to have 1 skill in each attribute that you want to maximize and have them be miscellaneous. That way, when you're close to leveling, you can train those skills for max gains. But I cannot stress this enough. Don't try this if you burn out easily, because doing shit like this can get really tiresome. Each level gains you hit points, and what determines how many hit points you get per level is that your character will get 10% of their endurance as hit points. It's a pretty simple formula. Once your character has achieved 10 points in any combination of major or minor skills, you are eligible for a level. Now that may sound like that's all there is to talk about, but it isn't. We need to talk about how leveling ends up playing out for characters that start really weak. It's a lot of this, to be honest, and that's not very fun. I know this is blasphemy, but if you find yourself in a situation with slow leveling characters, just turn the difficulty down and go exploring. There's no harm in it. Just do yourself a favor, don't use macros to hit your left mouse button for you, and also don't go to the spellmaker and make an intensity 1 spell in each spellcasting class for training, and definitely don't start the macro and walk away to watch TV while the game auto levels for you, because that shit will burn you out. So don't do that. But do that if you really don't want to deal with the early game bullshit. All the good stuff is at the end anyway. Daedric armor, glass armor, and shit like that. So really, do what you want, it's that kind of game.
Well done, mortal. You have preserved the integrity of my wager with Sheogoth. Now it will end as fated, and not due to the meddling of the Daedra Prince. Take this, and use it wisely.
Morrowind's about becoming a prophesized godlike figure, so it only makes sense that the game lets you become a god. There's 2 paths to godhood. One that has you arduously following the main storyline, and one that your class skills will lead you to. But only if you pick the only 2 skills that matter: alchemy and enchanting, and in that order. Alchemy is god tier in Morrowind, even when you aren't exploiting the system. Now I'm serious with this. The reason to me, and you all may not agree with this, but because of the way fatigue works and the instant nature of potions as opposed to magic, puts it far and away above any other option for protection. So let's say you're in a fight, and dude lands a crit on you so hard that you're nearly dead in 1 shot. And this isn't so uncommon in the early game, especially if you're a mage class and race like Breton. You have 2 options. You could try to heal yourself with a spell, but with how staggering works in the game, it might be a while before you can get that spell off. And if your fatigue is low, then there's a chance your spell will fail just enough to get you killed. Potions work instantly from the inventory, and you can stack several potions at a time to speed up a healing effect and make yourself invincible for about 20 seconds. It also works 100% of the time, so no worrying about spell failures. But on the exploit side of things, you know how I was saying that alchemy scales off intelligence? Well, what I didn't mention is that you can make potions of Fortify Intelligence, then use that increase in your intelligence to make a stronger potion, which you will drink to make an even stronger potion, and on and on and on, until you're some kind of alien life form looking over the world with cool indifference as you temporarily gain godhood insight, then lose it the moment it wears off. Once your intelligence is somewhere in the millions, you can make a Fortify Strength potion and Superman punch a motherfucker through a building. It may seem like an exploit, and it probably is, but it is fun, god damn it, and the Elder Scrolls universe is worse off for its exclusion. Part of the fun of Morrowind is in how easy you can break it. Hell, the first few minutes you play the game, you get 2 scrolls that can let you jump nearly across the entire continent. If you got a levitate spell, you can even survive it. The game is telling you to break it. Are you man enough to break it? But again, to the question, what is the most efficient way to level this ability? Well, you know that town Balmora? It's a beautiful place. It's the same town where male model and sweaty opium addict Chaos Kosades lives. You'll know him by name, but remember him by his abs. Well, Balmora has a temple, and in that temple is a man. That man has some very important herbs, marshmallow and wickweed. Why is that important? Because he stays infinitely stocked on this shit, and their main use is in making potions of healing. Want to break the game in the first few minutes? Go outside and rest for a few days in a row, and wait to be attacked by the Dark Brotherhood. Then strip that dumbass down to his skippies, and sell his armor to the nearest store. You'll get about 1,200 gold and more depending on your reputation. And you take that money and buy up all of this dude's wickweed and marshmallow. You're gonna keep on buying, opening, and closing that dialogue box until you have an insane amount of this shit. Then you go to wherever you keep your alchemy tools and you make some potions. Once you have approximately 200 of these potions in your inventory, sell half of them to the town alchemist shop, and start all over again. Do this a couple of times and you'll have a maxed out alchemist capable of making potions that can crash the game. Motherfuck! The thing that Morrowind doesn't do here that I personally appreciate is that it doesn't pull that cheap shit where the thing that you make is less valuable than the ingredients you bought to make it. I mean, you actually break even on a lot of this stuff. And once you get to level 40 in alchemy, you'll start making a pretty modest profit. Until those potions are made by a master, then you're able to make a single potion capable of buying out an entire town. But also, because all the stores around here are like 7-Elevens, cashier never has enough cash on hand, man. But still, it's nice when a game doesn't slap our hands when we're trying to find creative ways of breaking it. What I like about it most is that it feels like a business you're running with your digital avatar, unlike where in other games you wonder why anybody bothers making anything if they can never break even on any of it. I know it's a way to control the in-game economy, but why? Why control it? Let it run amok. If the player wants to make their fortune making the best restore health potions in all of Morrowind, I mean, why not allow that? When you're really ready, though, to break the game, go to see the alchemist in Wolverine Hall in Sage of Mora and buy bloat and bloat, then some more bloat, then all the ash yams that you can carry. Then head back to your house, deposit your bounty, and do it all over again until you have a chest full of those 2 ingredients. Then gather up your supplies to make Fortify Strength potions, Fortify Endurance, anything that you can think of that might be neat to make ridiculously powerful. Sky's the limit, friend, until you crash your computer and find out the limit is the sky. Now, once you have all your ingredients, you're not going to make a potion yet. You're going to need to make the long, agonizing journey to Azura's Shrine, which is quite a walk from Molag Mar, but you'll be rewarded for your efforts, with quite a view of a pretty little wetland, and Azura's Shrine popping up over the cliffs. There you'll get a quest to kill some Daedra. The walk is long and the fight can be difficult, but good thing we have some organic, non-GMO medicine in our bag that makes us a brick wall for the entire fight. At the end of all of this, you'll be rewarded with a soul gem. But not just any kind of soul gem, but Azura's Star. A soul gem so powerful, it can capture any soul inside it, even those of wannabe gods like Vivek. You know we're going to be doing that shit. Using the alchemy trick gets your intelligence somewhere in the 3,000 plus range, since enchanting has a chance to succeed or fail, and that chance scales off intelligence. We want to make sure that our precious work of art will not in any way be impeded by random chance. With an intelligence of 3,000, we can enchant pretty much whatever we want and get a 100% chance to succeed. When you're ready to start enchanting, get yourself some golden saints, summon them up, and soul trap them into Azura's Star. Any soul with a rating of over 400 will allow you to craft constant effect gear. And once you have traveled all over creation finding the Fortify attribute spell you need, you'll have gear granting you a ridiculous amount of ability buffs, making you a walking force of nature. And best of all, it was a journey to get here. It wasn't like the game made you feel invincible from the start. It didn't give you all the best moments after character creation. You needed to grind it out to get there. Find the materials, find the spells, and your reward is crafting something unbelievably powerful that unlocks the true potential of the game. The reward was something that made the whole trip getting there worth it. It's a really great and very balanced game. Mwah! The factions of Morrowind are some of the most varied that I think I've ever seen before, or since, mainly because of the addition of the Great Houses. Each house represents a patchwork of religious and moral beliefs, derived from a mishmash of tribes that united under the leadership of a house. Therefore, their belief systems vary wildly from house to house, and are often influenced by geographic locations as well. House Redoran, according to the wiki, prizes virtue of duty, gravity, and piety. Duty is to one's family and clan. Gravity is the essential seriousness of life. Life is hard and events must be judged, endured, and reflected upon with due care and earnestness. Piety is respect for the gods and the virtues they represent. A light, careless life is not worth living. The Redorans are a serious people sharing a border with Skyrim, living in harsh weather where conditions make for a tough life. Their morals are set around practicality, judging things as they are and not how we would like them to be. They wish to preserve traditions of the Dunmer people and are natural enemies of the Tribunal Temple, due to the fact that House Redoran sides with the invaders, the Imperial Legion. Their closest ally would be the Fighters Guild, as both strive to uphold the warrior's ethos. If you become the leader of House Redoran, you will be able to build your own house, which is called a stronghold, but it plays out like several fetch quests. There's also a mod called A Nice Place to Stay, if the stronghold doesn't suit your needs for a real house. House Halalu, on the other hand, is a house on its way to total demise in Morrowind lore, but they don't know it yet. When it came time for the Ebonheart Pact, House Lalu aligns with a race that Dark Elves love to enslave, and a race that they're none too fond of either, both of which have been in a constant war and fear of war state with each other, and will prove to be one of the worst and unstable alliances in the Alliance War. After several disastrous slip-ups, House Halalu would be eventually overtaken by House Drez, but are still operating in Vardenfell at the start of the events of Morrowind. They were one of the houses that kept very close ties to the Empire, and paid dearly for it when the Imperial Legion withdrew its forces from Morrowind after the rise of you. You're the guy who rises. House Lalu is a bureaucrat and merchant's dream. They side with coin, and whoever has the largest pocket wins a date with a Lalu. They are the less xenophobic of the houses of Morrowind, and welcome races from all over Tamriel. House Telvanni is the last of the joinable houses. They are what magic looks like if you let it run amok. Their code of ethics is based on one sentence: the powerful define the standards of virtue. So it should come as no surprise that their trade is exploiting the lands for resources and using slave labor to do it. Their restrictions on magical research is unshackled, save for maybe necromancy, which the entire continent frowns upon, except when you use it.
I don't know. It is such an honor to meet you.
They are isolationists and do not engage with any of the other 5 houses, and wish only to be left alone to their studies, except for Master Arian, who concerns himself with affairs outside of the house. Not a house in any respect, but very related to the houses, is the Morag Tong. Did I mention that assassination is legal in Morrowind? Well, it sure is. But only if you have a contract from the Morag Tong. The Morag Tong are a sort of police that go out to the great houses in Morrowind and carry out assassinations to handle petty squabbles between them to prevent wars from breaking out. It may seem foreign to us, but murder in Morrowind helps prevent more from dying, and the Tong are seen as a necessity of life. Now each of these houses is like a mirror image of the guilds of the Imperial Legion, so picking one over another may make another house angry. So for instance, I noticed that the further I progressed in the Mages Guild, the more the Telvanni hated me because I was working with the enemy and was at times undermining their plans. If I played as the Telvanni, I may have been able to see the other side of the conflict. The faction quests in Morrowind are some of the best in the series, but not because all the quests are winners. Some are standouts, and some are mindless busywork, but I think one faction sort of underlines the design philosophy of Morrowind's faction quests perfectly. The Mages Guild has a pretty interesting quest arc. Yes, if you start in Balmorra, you'll be picking mushrooms and plants and all that, which isn't terrible as far as opening quest lines go, but once you get your first quest from Rhaenys, that is when things get peculiar. See, Rhaenys isn't like most guild quest givers of reputable establishments. She doesn't care if you murder, if you cheat, if you steal, or do a whole lot of everything above. She is a dubious character to be sure. Her first quest has you go out into the dangerous part of town collecting guild dues and recruiting mages, but the person you're supposed to collect from claims she's left the guild, and the person you're recruiting says that the guild is extorting people and forcing them to join just so they can collect dues. One of their quests is to escort another fellow mage to a neighboring town, but she heavily implies that she doesn't care if the guy makes it to the next town. All she cares about is his research notes. So you could kill him and steal his notes, and she would be perfectly content with that. Another quest has her sending you to kill a necromancer, but when you get there, the woman you're supposed to kill puts up a good front, but if you punch her in her goddamn lion whore mouth, she summons a ghost. But either way, it looks a lot like this Rhaenys woman is into a lot of extortion and a lot of coercion. Her missions make the Mages Guild seem more like a mafia than a guild. Then comes time for you to find a spy. Who the spy is fairly obvious, and when you bring her the evidence, she's thankful. Gives you a Daedric dagger, which is fucking awesome, and some scrolls, and that would seem to be the end of it. And upon researching this mission, I also discovered that Bethesda may have had other plans for this quest. It looks like there were supposed to be conversations with more characters, Ciri Lonwy and Malvin, which implies that they planned on having this mission involve more investigation before completion. But hold up, there's something else to this mission, and all the missions that came before it. Now let's pretend for a minute that you escorted that high elf to town safely, and that you didn't kill the necromancer. If this is true, instead of turning in the Telvanni spy, you can frame Rhaenys as the spy. Did Bethesda do something cool with the quest line? You goddamn right they did. They included branching, but not per quest. They did something that The Witcher didn't even have a chance to do yet, but still gets all the credit for doing it. They made decisions you made earlier in the game have an impact on later missions without the knowledge of the player. It's pretty fucking cool. Some of the factions intertwine with one another, assuring it's difficult to be master of both at the same time. A perfect example of this is shown with the Fighters Guild questline. There's a bit of conflict between the thieves and the fighters, and I don't want to spoil it here because it's pretty cool, but I found a forum post that's so alliterative that I wanted to feature it like the finest example of people being dope as shit to one another. What he describes in great detail and prose is that you must play both sides against one another, doing quests for one guild while doing a quest for the opposition to undermine the other guild's progress, and if you do it all well, you'll get a quest to kill the architect behind the troubles and become the leader of both houses. Now, Morrowind's design is quite something. It trusted the player to make their own decisions without having to be reminded that there might be some other way around the problem. They trusted that the player would see that they're acting against the guild that they might want to join at some part, and that this fact might prompt them to join right away to even out their reputation, so they don't lose access to either faction, which is a fine example of a numeric system influencing the player's custom narrative. Without saying a word about it, the game has given the player two choices: choose a side or try to save both. I seem to remember later games losing some of this charm, but I guess we'll find out in later videos if that's true. It was just something that really stuck out to me this go around with Morrowind, but something that hasn't gone away are the bugs. I joined a Morag Tong somewhere in this last playthrough and got a quest from a member of the guild. Apparently, he was a Daedric priest communicating with Mephala. He tells me that I need to end the life of a noble's son, I think. My brain's a little fuzzy on the target's details, to be honest. All I know is that when I get there, where he's supposed to be, he ain't there. Then you find out that he's in Narmak, and when you get there, he's killed 2 rampaging Netch. So I go in and I kill him, only to find out that the Netch cannot be destroyed because they've been made permanent objects in the area. This is bad because their hitbox is as large as this entire arena, and since you can't destroy them, you can't loot the dead bodies of the men you just killed, which means you cannot finish the mission. Ah, Bethesda, I knew I'd find you in here somewhere. I was working for the Mages Guild as a gopher for a cat lady. Go for mushrooms, go for flowers, go for sabotage, but I was a glorified errand boy. And since I was released from that slave ship, I hadn't wandered far from Balmora. It's like a safe space from the madness outside the town. I decided after many adventure abortions where I would die to either falling off a cliff or entering a dungeon that I had no business in at my level, and I would die so quickly, so unceremoniously, that it would remind me of the dangers lurking inside of caves, ruins, and sharp-looking doors, that I would remember the quick save button. The cat lady's quests weren't taking me so far. In fact, the mission seemed easy at first, but even picking flowers is apparently a matter of life and death in Morrowind. Kids must grow up quickly in this continent, growing up without a father because while tilling the fields, he was eaten in one gulp by an aelet. No wonder everybody's so pissed off, huh? Then the opportunity came. Seems the good word had traveled up from the cat lady to the second floor, and I was ready for something important. And most of all, I was ready to leave Balmora. I was being sent to collect guild dues and recruit a freelance magician. My destination was 2 caves, far away from Balmora and any town that I knew of. The only directions I had were vague. Head east out of Balmora and past the fort until you hit a lake. I walked for 20 minutes through what seemed like hordes of cliff racers in Katagori, through lava pit dotted land and past old forgotten Daedric ruins. I approached a cave and found my first target. She refused to pay her guild dues, so I refused to let her live. On my way to my second destination, I became lost and disoriented from constant attacks from the land's various wildlife, and just as I came across my first sign, showing me the way to Molag Mar, a red wind was rolling in, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I followed the signs and the attacks became more frequent, and every sign led me to another sign and forked paths that made me doubt for just a moment that I was going the right way. That uncertainty had me convinced that I was going the wrong way the whole time, and that I'd be lost or killed until I found another signpost and another cache of supplies. But by the time I had made it to my second target, I was feeling sick, and people could see it on me too. No one wanted to talk to me, which made it extra difficult to convince the leader of this band of mages to join the Mages Guild. But with the help of a potion of fortified personality, I was able to persuade him that I was trustful, and that joining the Mages Guild was in his best interests. I exited the caves feeling accomplished, but now I had a different problem to deal with. How was I going to get home? I was already so far from home, and backtracking would likely take longer than a trip to Molag Mar, so I checked out my map and decided to press on to Molag Mar. I was attacked constantly by animals sick from the blight, and I contracted many more afflictions. By the time I got to the next signpost, my status effects read like the appendix of a medical diagnostics manual. I was uncertain if I would make it to Molag Mar, but as I made a final turn and the ash wind receded, there in the distance was a silt strider, and just around the corner, Molag Mar. That is how I felt the first time I journeyed out to a distant town when I first played this game. You see, all of those systems, the fatigue, the magicka bar without regen, all of that contributed to the feelings that I felt, the tension that crept its way in as I realized that I might not have brought enough supplies, the feeling that I wasn't sure if I had enough magicka to get me through all those encounters. All of those feelings were brought on by the way those systems were designed. They were designed deliberately to elicit this emotion and that feeling. To me, there's nothing better than preparing for a long journey and asking yourself questions like, okay, what part of the province am I going to be walking through? Are there a lot of storms and blighted creatures there? How far away is my destination? Do I have enough potions of healing, magicka, and fatigue for this trip? Do I have a way to kill magical creatures? Am I heavy right now? Do I need to upgrade my gear before heading out? You see, you felt like you were actually embarking on a real epic journey through a hostile volcanic wasteland. And even if you're totally prepared for your trip, there's no guarantee you'll even find the place, because the game does not, in any way, hold your hand for even 1 minute. It might hold your hair as it takes you from behind, but that's only for leverage. The landscapes are genuinely interesting enough that the journey is fun, and finding your way to a place is just part of it. Landmarks are dotted throughout to guide you from one road to another, but as you go along, you cannot escape the feeling that you should have arrived at your destination already, and when you finally do, it's very likely you did so with a sigh of relief. I still get that feeling when I go into the archipelago north of the island, especially at lower levels. Being that far from civilization, not being sure where the nearest town is, and watching the numbers of my potions dwindle with each encounter. And oh my god, so many cliff racers. It's unlike anything I've ever played in a long time. The game's difficulty, intermingling stat block, and fascinating worlds and factions is still one of the deepest titles Bethesda's put out, but far from their most polished. It carried the most blemishes, but had the biggest heart. Morrowind, I believe, is the pinnacle of Elder Scrolls, and we can only imagine what it could have been like if Bethesda had decided to stick with their simulation roots instead of choosing the far wiser option of mass appeal. Fucking posers. Hey everybody, thanks for coming by. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel, click that little bell, go follow me on Twitter, go to my second YouTube channel, which should be linked below. Play with your titties, dance around a little bit, show me your ass. And most of all, please, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Even if you hated everything I said, please, make sure you let me know. I value your input especially.